What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. Week 6, similar to honestly to weeks 4 and 5 in terms of who the top buys are, who the top sells are, and the fact that I feel like there's more sells than buys out there in the market. So we are going to touch on the players who remain the top buys and sells to start, and then we'll transition into some new players after that. It is in weeks like this, times that I want to reiterate that you're not always just like trying to buy low or sell high on players. Sometimes trading is more about understanding what are the needs of your team, what are your strengths, and just finding a league mate that is in the opposite situation. If you are way too deep at wide receiver, you've got like 6 guys out there that you'd be okay starting every week, but you're extremely thin at running back, don't try and like watch this video and see who I talk about as a buy low running back and go after them. Go out into your league, look at who's deep at running back, look for a team that's been decimated at wide receiver, and see if there's a deal to be done there. Instead of just like trying to look for players who have been playing kind of poorly, hopefully they play better, just look for a league mate that is in the opposite situation as you, and maybe you can like buy high on a player. Like maybe you can say, okay, this guy's been really good. He's going to keep being really good, but they kind of have to deal him away because they're so thin at the position that I have a strength. And so again, it's not always about buying low and selling high. Sometimes it's really more just about who can you match up with in your league and get a deal done that works out for the both of you. Now, having said that, I do still think the top 3 trade targets are Rashee Rice, Ted McMillan, and Brock Bowers. We talked about that last week. I think it remains true at this point. Remember how with Rashee Rice I've been saying like, oh, kind of have to be undefeated, have 1 loss. At this point, I don't even care what your record is. Unless you're 0-5, you can trade for Rashee Rice. And if you want to just put all your chips on the table and you're 0-5, you want to go for it, sure, trade for him there. But he's going to be back next week, and so it doesn't matter what your record is. I'll be honest, you probably missed your window at this point. Like if I had rostered Rashee Rice, which I did in both of the leagues that I could have drafted, both my redraft leagues this season, I drafted him. I'm not sitting on him for 5 weeks and then all of a sudden trading him, unless you're going to give me like a top 5 wide receiver value. I'm not going to sit on him for 5 weeks and finally trade him now. So I think you probably missed your window, but if you didn't, go after him. He's going to be a top 8 to 10 wide receiver when he returns, shot to be top 5, shot to be top 3 if everything goes right. For Tet, he's been like inches away from a breakout in what seems like every week. It seems like he's 1 play away from that breakout every single game. But I mean, the people kind of saying he's underperformed so far, that feels a little ridiculous. 5 straight games with at least 8 targets. He's 8th among wide receivers in targets, 14th in receiving yards. He just hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but he is not a player that we expect to like not score touchdowns. He is going to score touchdowns in the NFL. He has an unbelievable catch rate, great catch radius. He's going to be a red zone weapon for this team. It just hasn't happened quite yet. And then I mean, honestly, I think the big game is probably coming against Dallas, but we've been saying that for a little while. Again, Dallas has like the worst defense in the NFL, especially against the pass. So hopefully it happens this week. But yeah, we've been hoping for the breakout in recent weeks. And then with Bowers, there is no way the team that drafted him is doing well. If they are, honestly, it's because they drafted him, he got hurt, and then they happened to hit on one of these breakout tight ends. And so either you can trade for him because that team is doing so badly that they really need to win now, or you can trade for him because that team was doing bad, but they added a great tight end. And now maybe they're like, hey, maybe I can live without Brock Bowers. I don't know when he's going to be back, and trade for him there. I think when you're doing a trade, you have to be willing to accept the fact that he might not be 100% until probably week 9. They have a bye in week 8. So it would be pretty smart for them to either like keep him limited or just not play him, you know, in week 6, in week 7, go on by in week 8, and then he's 100% good to go in week 9. That's how I'd play it if I was them. So we'll see what happens. But when you're trading, just assume that he's not going to be out there until then, but that when he does return after the bye, he will be probably the tight end 1 overall in fantasy. And so if you can afford the hit, especially if you have a tight end that you hit on later or in free agency that has been doing perfectly fine and you want to kind of assume some risk and get some upside there, I'd go after him. In terms of players we're trading away, pretty similar to previous weeks. Tony Pollard, Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard. I've literally listed Chuba Hubbard as a sell every single week this season. And all 3 of those running backs are for the exact same reason. We talk about every offseason about how it is really difficult for a running back on a bottom 5 offense to be productive in fantasy. Judkins is just putting that theory to shame, but it's the outliers. It's players who, because clearly Judkins is an extremely talented player. Players like that who just hit on the high end of their outcome and they just become the featured weapon of their team, those are the players that break the mold. But unless you're that, you are not going to do well on a bottom end team. And we see that on these three. 100% of the Titans backfield touches is worth about 14 full PPR points. 100% of the Saints backfield touches is worth about 18, and 100% of the Panthers backfield touches is worth about 23 full PPR points per game. Now, that's not the end of the world if you're getting 100% of the touches, but no running back in the NFL is. In fact, Tony Pollard is currently the single most featured running back in the NFL over the last month, and he's only getting 88% of the backfield touches. In fact, there are only 4 running backs over the last 4 weeks to see at least 80% of their team's volume. It's Tony Pollard, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Chase Brown. And Chase Brown is another prime example of how you can be featured, but if your offense is terrible, then your value goes way down. So circling back to our sell highs, Pollard, Kamara, Chuba. For these 3 to be valuable, they need such a massive percentage of their team's volume. And while they were used heavily to start the season, I just don't see that playing out over the second half of the year. Spears is back now. He's going to ramp up every week. That's going to turn into a 50-50 split. And if they're splitting 14 full PPR points, that's not going to be valuable for either one of them. Rico Dowdle showed last week he is clearly talented. And honestly, he should be the running back 1 on this team. Like, I know that the Dolphins defense is bad. If Chuba remains out this week, he's probably going to drop another nuke against Dallas. And you can say, okay, those are the 2 best matchups in the NFL. Rico forced 9 missed tackles last week. Do you know how many missed tackles Chuba forced when he was healthy this season on 53 rush attempts? 0. He did not force a single missed tackle. Enrico forced 9 missed tackles just this last game. Chuba has 0 explosive runs on the season. Rico, 4th highest explosive run rate among all running backs in the NFL with at least 50 rush attempts. Chuba, again, been on the sell high list every single week this season, and every single week this season, he loses more and more and more value. You just have to get rid of him before he's completely worthless. And then with Kamara, the backfield there is appealing, right? Like we like the Saints offense because they play fast. We like Kamara because he catches passes, but he's not catching as many passes this season. Kendre is there, stealing more snaps every week and more touches every week. Taysom Hill is back to vulture touchdowns. They're probably going to be tanking later in the season. I wouldn't be shocked if Kamara's traded, and that is an out. Like if he gets traded to like Chicago or something like that. If he got traded, I don't think he'd go to the Chiefs, but like a higher end offense that would be willing to use him in the receiving game. And maybe there's an injury that we don't know about yet that will happen that'll kind of force a trade here. That is an out. So I will say if you don't want to give away Kamara because you're considering that out, and he does have the talent, if he lands on an offense that's willing to feature him in the receiving game and is better, of course, in the Saints, then he has upside. So if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But rest of season right now in the rest of season rankings, Kamara's my running back 28, Chuba 30, Pollard 35. Those are just not valuable running backs. They're not difference makers. They're players you don't really want to be starting every week. And so if someone is willing to give you something for them, take them. Top wide receiver look to sell continues to be DK Metcalf. We talked about him with sell high last week. The fact that he had this big game in week 4, this breakout game, hopefully some of your league mates are like, nice, that's a sign of things to come. Even after that game, 20% target share on the season. Arthur Smith just doesn't give his wide receivers heavy enough volume for us to trust. I was hoping that would change this season. It has not. He's going to be, a high-end touchdown producer, and so that's going to be really nice, but the floor is going to be really low when he doesn't score the touchdowns. He's going to be just far too volatile for us to trust him as a wide receiver too. Also, no wide receiver room is seeing less volume than the Pittsburgh Steelers. 100% of the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver targets is worth about 19 full PPR points per game. So even though Metcalf is the 4th most featured wide receiver in the entire NFL, getting half of this wide receiver room's volume over the last month, it just doesn't crack the top 20 in overall usage. I don't know. Like, players I prefer over him rest of the season right now are Marv, Ladd, Pearsall, Zay Flowers, Deebo Samuel, Pickens, Diggs, and Brian Thomas Jr. If you get any of them for Metcalf, I would do it. Although I don't love doing, people send me these all the time, 1-for-1. So like if you've got like 2 wide receiver 2s, just like flip-flopping them, unless you have a really, really big case for one of them, like you really like one of them, you're like, Nick, I think they can be a top 7 wide receiver rest of the season. I think this guy's going to fall to like 30. Unless that's the case, I don't love just flip-flopping 2 wide receiver 2s. It just feels like you're gambling at that point. Like if these guys are valued extraordinarily similarly rest of season, it's like, why? Like you're just like asking to be like slightly wrong, or like even if you're slightly right, like how much does it make a difference? But again, even with that said, I would take Marv, Ladd, Pearsall, Flowers, Debo, Pickens, Diggs, and Brian Thomas Jr. all ahead of Metcalf if you felt like doing them 1-for-1. But I prefer like a wide receiver running back kind of flip. Then at tight end, this is a new name for you. I would look to sell Sam LaPorta. We do the end of season data every year in terms of league winners, like which players provided a higher playoff rate and championship rate over what you would expect for where you drafted them. And what we see every single season is that unless you end up with the number 1 or number 2 tight end overall, and usually just number 1, selling high at a tight end is just always a good call. Like even if you end up saying, oh, Sam LaPorta ended as the 4th best tight end in fantasy, if you were able to sell high at any point in the season on Sam LaPorta, you look at the data and you made the playoffs and you made the championship and won the championship at a higher rate than average, and a higher rate than you would have had just holding. Like it's just a good idea, unless you have the number 1 tight end. If someone ever comes to you with a deal because of like how good the tight end's been playing and able to like capitalize on selling high, you should just do it. I understand hesitancy there. If like you have Sam LaPorta, the top tight end in free agency is like Isaiah Likely, and you're like, whoa, I'm not just dumping, my tight end to pick up Isaiah Likely. Okay, if that's the case, no. But for a lot of you out there, like if like Harold Fannon's an option, if you added Waller, if Mason Taylor's out there, like some of these guys where it's like we actually think the volume rest of the season could be okay and could be really solid as like a low end tight end 1. If you're able to sell high on someone who's a mid-range tight end 1 and drop down to a low end tight end 1, but you're able to pick up a really, really nice like wide receiver 2, running back 2 that can really help you out for depth, bye weeks, injuries, all those sorts of things, and has the upside to maybe be a true difference maker, it's just beneficial to do over time. And I just don't see the upside for Sam LaPorta this season. He's not going to be the tight end 1 overall. He's coming off the 3rd most receiving yards in a game in his career. He's coming off the 4th highest yards per reception of his career. The total usage this season isn't amazing, so it's not like he's spiked for usage. And this is even with J-Mo not doing that good. Like in weeks that J-Mo's not playing that well, the usage still isn't that strong overall for LaPorta. If J-Mo starts to get more involved, if the usage sticks and he doesn't have the highest yards per reception of his career, I don't know. Like I think he's fine, but if you can sell high on him, I would do. So I'm not looking to dump him again, but like if someone in your league is just getting crushed at tight end, see what they'd be willing to trade. All right, some more new names. Because again, a lot of that was players we've been over before. But again, if we keep talking every week, being like, sell this guy, sell this guy, sell this guy, at some point, you got to do it. But back to some new names. I at least want to have a discussion about the Cardinals. Now, I know that like 85% of you are going to throw up when I say this, but should we be trading for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride right now? I know that the Cardinals are just a disgrace of a franchise. Like their coaching staff, particularly on offense, the defense isn't that bad, but like on offense, their coaching staff is a complete joke. It is pathetic. They all deserve to be fired now. They won't be. Hopefully in a couple of weeks they will be, but they deserve to be fired now or even at the beginning of the season. And both Kyler and Marv have looked completely disinterested at times this season, which isn't like new from what we saw last year. I'll say this. Marv is, I think my 3rd, I can't remember exactly, my 3rd most rostered wide receiver in best ball. I have him on one of my 2 redraft leagues this season. And I can tell you, someone who again invested heavily in best ball, who drafted him in 1 or 2 redraft leagues, I can tell you I'm not pumped about either one of those decisions. But I think that's the point. No one wants Marv. People are messaging me every single day about McBride as well. Like maybe you don't think, you're like, oh, Nick, no one's worried about McBride. No, I get messages every day, people asking me like, why is Trey McBride so bad this season, despite him being 2nd among tight ends in targets, 3rd in receiving yards? Again, so if you don't have McBride, you're like, no one's willing to give up McBride. I can promise you people are willing to give up Marv. They're willing to give up McBride for not that much. People hate the Cardinals. And again, for good reason. I hate them too. I hope their staff is fired midseason. But part of the reason why they've been so mediocre is related to their opening schedule. Through 5 weeks, they've gotten matchups against the Saints, the Panthers, and the Titans. And for a lot of teams in the NFL, those are nuke matchups, right? Those are matchups where we expect our players to do extraordinarily well. The Cardinals are a very, very weird team because they will not start trying until they are pushed. And if they get any lead, like literally any lead, they think that they're really good, they are going to sit on that lead for the rest of the week and probably lose the game. So they walked into those games knowing that these are the 3 worst teams in the NFL and that they can win these games. And in all 3 of those games, the Cardinals got up to an early lead. They tried to sit on that lead for the rest of the game and just hoped that the opposing team could not catch up. In week 1 against the Saints, they got up 20-10 in the early third quarter. There was 9 minutes left in the third. They did not score for the rest of the game. In week 2 against the Panthers, they got up 27-3. Again, in the early third quarter, they did not score for the rest of the game. They won by only 5 points. Then last week against the Titans, they got up 21-3. In the early second quarter, they did not score for the rest of the game. They lost by 1. So in all 3 games, they did not score over the final 24 minutes at least, at sometimes more. And they just sat on their lead against teams they thought they were way better than. But again, you stink. They're not better than very many teams this season. Here's the thing though. The Cardinals are only favored in 2 more games the rest of the season. So 2 of the remaining 11 games they are favored in. And one of those is the Jaguars in week 12, which makes no sense to me. There is no way. They're 3-point favorites right now against the Jaguars in week 12. That's ridiculous. They should not be favorites by that much. They should not be favorites at all. They should go into that game as 3 or 4 point underdogs against the Jaguars. So realistically, they should be favored in 1 more game rest season. They do not have James Conner rest of the season. They do not have Trey Benson for at least week 10. Reading between lines, it seems like maybe a little bit longer, but we're looking at week 10, 11, 12 for the return of Trey Benson. And they also get the Falcons and the Bengals in the semifinals and the finals, which are 2 great matchups for defense. So again, I am far from excited to roster Marv. I do think McBride has somewhat underwhelmed thus far as well. Again, you can only say underwhelmed so much, being second in targets and third in yardage, but that's the point, is that no one is happy with how they've played, and so it will not be hard at all to get them. But the passing volume should be going way up moving forward. The Cardinals play very passively when they have a lead, but they will not have very many leads rest of season. So if McBride is second in tight end usage, and if Marv is the 6th most featured wide receiver in the NFL, with 3 of their 5 games being leading game scripts, then the ceiling is clearly there, with only 1 of their next 11 games being projected leading scripts. So it's not going to feel good, but I can promise you, if someone's looking at their phone and they see a trade for Marv, they're like, ooh, I can get rid of Marvin Harrison Jr. Don't put a lot in there. Do not put a lot. But if you can acquire him for someone that you're like, I'm not even using this player, I don't know. I feel like it's worth doing. And again, I think a lot of you don't think Trey McBride is available. He is. The amount of messages I get wondering if they should be dumping Trey McBride because he's not good anymore. He is. They're just in these scripts where they just decide we're not going to play fast. We're not going to throw the ball. We're not going to be aggressive. Once every single week they're losing and losing and losing and losing and losing, and they're playing much better teams, they're going to throw the ball a lot more. I can promise you Trey McBride is going way up in value when that happens. The other player I want to talk about is Bucky Irving, because I don't think he's a buy. I don't think he's a sell. I think it completely depends on your team. What are your needs? Because he could be the best sell in the world or the best buy in the world, depending on where you're at right now. He is going to miss this week's game. Based on the reporting, I think he's at risk of missing week 7 at the Lions as well. And if that happens, they've got at the Saints in week 8, which they can win without Bucky Irving. Then they go on bye in week 9. So if they want to get him 100%, like if he's only like 70, 75% come that week 8 game, I think they hold him out again. And so there's a world here where you do not have him until week 10. And if you are struggling right now, then I don't know, you're 1-4, even if you're 2-3, but like maybe one of those wins was like, maybe something that was close, maybe you shouldn't have won. If you don't think you can survive without Bucky Irving for the next month, then I would try to trade him away this week, especially if we don't get news. Like if news comes out where it's like, oh, he's definitely going to miss the next 2 games. At that point, it's kind of difficult. Like once the public kind of is like, oh, okay, he's not going to play this week, he's not going to play next week. Like which one's play after that? Like if everyone starts to know that, then people might back off, the value goes down, and maybe it's just not worth dumping him. Maybe you just have to hope that you can survive the next month. But if we don't get that reporting and it's like, oh, like he's kind of trending okay, and someone's willing to give you like a running back one for him that's healthy, I might do it. I might take the value. If you're struggling with depth, I might take 2 players for him. Like you have to make the playoffs. And so if you're 1-4, you can't go 1-5, 1-6, 1-7, and then be like, oh, nice, Bucky's back. If you're 1-7 at that point, you absolutely have to win out and dominate in points, and you're probably not going to do that. So it depends on your record there. But the flip side is also true. There's a lot of you out there that are 5-0, 4-1. At that point, the odds of you making the playoffs are incredibly high, even if you take a hit over the next month. And so you should be willing to assume some risk to build a super team. So you can afford to take that hit. If Bucky ends up being out to week 10, and I do not think it's going to be longer than that. So at worst, he's back in week 10. I would say the odds are he's back in week 8. If either of those comes true, I mean, you've got Godwin ramping up. You've got Evans coming back. You've got the offensive line. Come week 10, the offensive line going to be a lot more healthy. And my goodness, they're scheduled to close the season. Weeks 13 on, they play home versus the Cardinals, home versus the Saints, home versus the Falcons, at the Panthers, and at the Dolphins. I mean, that is a near perfect close to the season. And so if Bucky is healthy over that stretch, he's a league winner. Like that's just a fact. He'll be a league winner if he's out there getting the volume we saw him get to start the season. I know the inefficiency was kind of there. That's been with no Evans, no Godwin, injured offensive line, him battling through injury. Like you remove all of that and he's healthy and the offense is clicking. I mean, we're going to be projecting this kid as like a top 5 running back every single week in the weeks that matter the most. So if you're 5-0, if you're 4-1, please see what it'll take to get Bucky Irving. So I hope that you guys at least somewhat found this helpful. And remember, the best trades are not you trying to like sneakily buy low on some breakout superstar. It's finding a team that has the opposite strengths and weaknesses as your own and figuring out a trade that actually does help both sides. It's okay to make your opponent a little bit better. That's the best chance to make yourself better as well. Identify a team that's the opposite of you, see what helps you and helps them, and make it a win-win for both. So that'll do it for this one. Please hit subscribe if you are new on Spotify, you're new on YouTube. I'll be back tomorrow to go over my week 6 rankings, and then Friday to my favorite underdog plays this week. That, my friends, end it for this one, and thank you all for watching.